Welcome back, beautiful people, to episode 7 of Alpha Mama. This is episode 7, 2022, and today we are talking about creating a vision in our lives. And the inspiration we're using today is a book by Thich, Nhat, Hanh, who is a Buddhist, monk that he's passed away now just very recently, but he is very, very inspiring. He's meant to be the most prolific Buddhist author in the world. He died well into his 90s, I think 96. And the book is called Peace is Every Step, A Path to Mindfulness in Every Day. And so, Alpha Mama. Alpha Mama brings you the lowdown on books that change your lives in the self-development space. We do the reading and research so you can sit back, listen, and take the steps to live your best life and move forward towards a more grounded life that reflects your authentic self. Growing up, I didn't feel like I had a lot of great guidance. The lack of guidance in my own life led me to make choices that accumulated in me hitting rock bottom by the age of 30. I felt like I had no one to turn to, and that's when I turned to books and researching how to live my best life. Fast forward almost a decade, and I have experienced total transformation. At Alpha Mama, we believe it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. The only thing you need to succeed at your life is the belief that you can and the commitment to carry through with backing yourself. So, as I mention every week, basically this podcast series goes through a series of 3 different phases. Starting with how to create a vision for your life, and then looking at self-discipline and cultivating a mindset of self-discipline. And then finally we look at, abundance mindset, or financial resources and how to build our financial resources. So it's a really kind of holistic approach to self-development. And today, this week's book has been inspired by a lot of the conflict that's happening in the world. So there are a lot of sort of traditional corporate books to look at, but I felt like this week, with everything that's going on with Russia and the Ukraine, that I'd look at something a little bit more spiritual and holistic and grounding in terms of, what can each of us do in terms of cultivating a vision in our lives that encourages a world where we live in peace, and where we're not all on the brink of destruction because of some lunatic in a country over in Russia. And speaking of lunatics in Russia, I didn't know very much about Putin before this war. I just knew that he was, a bit draconian, whatever. I never bothered to find out anything about him. And then just recently I've watched this series on who he is and where he's come from. And it's like, wow, he is from the Cold War era. He was a KGB spy. Basically, he had a really tough, little rough upbringing where he was a fighter, and then in the KGB they basically just poison everyone, and then he was effectively, I think, a bit resentful being out of a job at the end of the USSR. So wow, talk about people being a product of their upbringing, and maybe not being fully engaged with a broader perspective outside of quite a twisted, dark beginning to life, So it would be really interesting to get inside the mind of someone like that who has had quite a full-on upbringing, and that would shape the way that they saw the world and the way that they saw reality, which is interesting. It just made me think of one thing that show just kept saying was like, the motto of a spy is never forgive and never forget, and we can definitely see that playing out in the way that he's annihilating the Ukraine. And so on this very heavy topic of war, destruction, increased supply chain issues and prices of petrol, and everything just seems to be chaos and falling apart on the back of a huge crisis of coronavirus. I felt like it was timely to think about, well, how do we find our gravity in all of that? How do we find our sanity? How do we stay grounded and feel connected with ourselves and connected with life and keep going when everything just seems to be falling apart around us? And it's not just me, it's literally everyone on this planet that has been going through this crisis for years, and it just seems to not end. It seems to just keep going. Thich Nhat Hanh, I think personally, is a bit of a master psychologist in terms of the way that he very simply explains really beautiful, like complex psychological concepts and turns them into something quite simple and beautiful and natural. And he goes through, so I found with this book, the first section, it's sort of a 3-part book. And it starts with, looking at meditation techniques. I found that part a little bit sort of taxing or boring just because it was very, it was really about, actioning techniques. And Thich Nhat Hanh basically focuses on breathing techniques and practicing a daily meditation. So he just simply creates these conscious breathing citations or recitals that you can say to yourself while you breathe, and that's part of the meditation process. So I'll give you an example of one. He talks about how we can calm our body through conscious breathing. And so breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. And really staying engaged with the present moment. And I thought, what a better time than now to think about vision in terms of how can we create peace in every moment of our lives, and how can we live within a vision of a lifestyle of peace and cultivate that in our lives. So meditation is something that Thich Nhat Hanh recommends, obviously, in staying grounded and grounded within ourselves, and just being embracing of the here and the now, and being connected and reconnecting in every step that you take, reconnecting in every time you sit down, reconnecting any time that you start losing yourself with your breath by focusing in on your breath and becoming one with your breath. So in this sort of Buddhist version of peace and calm and, having a peaceful reality and a peaceful vision for living, what he really advocates for is this notion of non-duality. And so not seeing things as, us and them, or, you and other, but rather embracing the whole picture and saying, okay, we're one. And when I embrace the oneness of everything, then I can find love and acceptance for all things, and I can find peace through that. Now, the section that I really loved and I really took to was section 2, so part 2, and it's called Transformation and Healing. So he describes feelings as being a drop, and that our emotions are a river of feelings. They're flowing, and each drop of water is a feeling, and they all rely on each other. They interexist to create this river of feelings. And he talks about feelings as only being 3 types of feelings: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And we're going to go into this again in other podcasts, because I find this really interesting, and I find it very true for myself anyway, is that when you really break it down, when you cut out all the noise in your life and you stop telling yourself a story and you just come into the feeling. And you know, because what we tend to do as humans is we tend to tell ourselves a story. We're triggered, we have a feeling, and then we go on a narrative in our head about what is going on. What does this feeling mean? Why is this happening to me? Is this a good feeling or a bad feeling? Why has this person triggered these feelings? And then you start rolling into this, like, you know, spiel of just bollocks, you know, that goes through your head. It's some narrative that you're telling yourself. And the truth is that we're all products of our subconscious programming. Look at Putin, for example, like annihilating Ukraine for no freaking good reason. We are all products of our subconscious programming. And if you allow your subconscious programming to take control of your mind and take you down that spiel of narrative that may or may not be true, but it definitely, no matter what way you think of it, it definitely is just a subjective perception of reality, then you're going to be interpreting all this stuff, and you're very tempted then to go into victimhood, or, you know, perpetrating. So you're kind of blaming others, or, you know, putting, you know, situations into a context that may or may not be real. Whereas if you focus instead on just ignore the narrative and go, okay, throw the narrative out the window. I'm just going to focus on my feeling right now, right here, right now. Right now, I feel good within myself. Right now, I feel unpleasant. I feel, you know, something is just chewing away at me. You know, that unsettled, bubbly feeling you get inside yourself when you're not settled and you're not happy, you're, you know, excitable, or there's a discomfort, you know, it's uncomfortable. You feel uncomfortable. If you just focus on that by itself, right now, I just feel uncomfortable. What Thich Nhat says is, you know, in Western society in particular, but just in general, you know, we tend to want to chase away our unpleasant feelings. But what he invites people to do is instead just to sit with it and breathe through it and just recognize it as an unpleasant feeling and be okay with that. And this is what he suggests saying to yourself. Breathing in, I know there is an unpleasant feeling in me. Breathing out, I know there is an unpleasant feeling in me. And then calling the feeling by its name, so identifying what it is. You know, I feel sorrow, I feel anger, I feel happiness, and recognizing it more deeply. So he has this technique that he uses for transforming your feelings, which I think is really powerful, and it's a practice I want to try and incorporate more of in my life, because I just think it would be really, really empowering in terms of being grounded and creating, you know, a grounded vision in my life. So these are the steps. So there are 5 steps. So first step is to recognize each feeling. So for example, fear, take out the fear, look at the fear. You know the fear springs from yourself, and you also know that mindfulness springs from yourself. And they're both inside you and they're not fighting. So see the fear, but also be mindful of the fear and see that it's all part of who you are. These are both aspects of you. Your fear's not bad. It's not something to be rejected. It's actually just something inside you, and that's okay. Everyone has fear. Then step 2 is to become one with the feeling. So he suggests it's better not to reject the feeling. And it's interesting because when you look at, shadow work, or look at things that we don't want to know about ourselves, no one wants to be fearful. No one wants to be that angry, bad person or whatever. Whatever part of you that you don't want to be, we tend to put it into our shadow, and so we can't see that it's there. But that doesn't mean it's not there. Other people can still see that part of you. It just means that you're not looking at it and you're not self-aware. It means that you're not self-aware and you can't see that within yourself, okay? But other people can see it. So we tend to reject the parts of ourselves we don't like. And when we see other people displaying those parts of ourselves that we don't like, we tend not to like them, or we tend not to like their behaviour, and we find it off-putting and we reject them, because we reject that part of ourselves. And it's only once you can embrace that within yourself that you can start embracing and accepting the things you don't like within other people as well, because you've matured enough to do that within yourself. And I mean, it's just basic Psych 101. You can't give to someone else what you can't give to yourself. And so if you can't give yourself love and acceptance and embrace yourself for who you are, both good and bad, then it's going to be very hard for you to embrace and accept the good and bad in others, that you don't want to deal with. So, but when you do that, becoming one with fear, you also have to remember that you're more than just that fear. The fear isn't all that you are. You're way more than that. And, it's important to, I guess, nourish it and then calm the feeling. So step 3 is to then focus on calming that feeling. And that's where you trigger your mindfulness of the feeling. And this is kind of like self-parenting, I guess. So, a lot of us, maybe those unpleasant feelings we have are triggered because, and we put them into our shadow space because maybe we were neglected in certain ways that we needed love and affection from our parents as children. But we've grown, our subconscious programming, we've been taught that those are bad things, and so we need to reject them because that's how parents treated us. They rejected us in those ways. And so then we tend to adopt that and reject that within ourselves. And so by embracing this concept of mindfulness, what you're doing is you're mindfully holding the space for the wounded child, the fear, the anger, the wounded inner child, whatever that is, but realizing that you actually have the power to do that yourself and self-parent your emotions is quite a powerful thing. And it's funny, I don't think I really understood what that meant or how to do it until I was in my mid-30s, which is appalling. All children should be taught this stuff from a young age. And so, the way Thich Nhat puts it, he talks about how, imagine the fear is a baby that's crying, and your mindfulness is a mother tenderly holding the crying baby. And then when the baby feels its mother holding it calmly and soothing it, it will calm down. And he mentions, so if a mother's holding its baby is distracted and it's like all over the place, if you're like avoiding calming the baby and you're like, maybe you're drinking, maybe you're yelling at someone else or keeping yourself busy or rushing around and distracting yourself, you're not going to calm the baby. You're just ignoring the baby. You need to actually stop and be fully focused on the baby and calm the baby. Calm the baby, and so then it's soothed. And just allow your emotions to be soothed by your inner mindfulness, by focusing on them and letting them be who they are and soothing them and saying, hey, it's okay, I'm here with you, fear. I hold your hand, I'm here with you. It's okay. It's okay that you have fear, but now I'm going to hold you and you're going to be okay because I'm here with you. And then the fourth step he suggests is releasing your feeling. So letting it go. So just be calm and release the feeling. It's okay. You're free. Liberate your fear. Liberate your fear. It's fine. Let it go. But what he suggests is that if you don't actually deal with what's causing the fear, then the fear will then just be triggered again, because you're never actually dealing with the root of the problem. So really those first 4 steps are about getting to a state of calm where you're actually in a place where you can look at your feelings genuinely and honestly without judgment and just allow them to be there and be calm with your feelings. The last step, which I think is really powerful, is to then look deeply. So he puts it as like a mother looking at its baby. Look into your baby deeply, even after the crying has stopped. You cannot hold your baby all the time, and therefore you need to look into him deeply to see the cause of what is wrong. And by looking, you will see that the suffering has many causes inside and outside your body. So, and this is really interesting. So looking at something's causing you to feel fear. And that may be something external or it may be something within you. And I think it's really powerful because one thing, when we truly have self-love and when we truly honour and respect ourselves, I think this is the birthplace for us to truly have love, respect and honour for other people around us. But we first need to find this within ourselves. When you truly have that love for yourself and you see what is causing the suffering, so what's triggering this emotion? Something external is happening that's making me feel anxious. Maybe someone hasn't given you clear boundaries around something. Maybe you feel that some injustice has occurred to you. Whatever it is, once you can identify what that is, you then have the choice and the option to do something about it. And recognizing that actually you matter and making sure that you're being loved and cared for and you're being put into the ideal scenario for you. What ecosystem do you need to be in to thrive? Or what changes do you need to make within yourself to feel good or to eliminate that feeling on a deeper level? How are you letting yourself down? Or how is your environment letting you down? And then creating a plan to address those issues and realize that it's okay for you to be in your ideal, environment. It's this beautiful analogy that people talk about. When a flower doesn't bloom, you don't blame the flower for not blooming. You look around the flower and you go, is there something wrong with the soil? Is it getting enough light? Is it getting enough water? What's going on? Is the positioning of this flower not in the right place? Because, and I strongly believe this, each one of us, I think, is a flower. And we each have this opportunity to really bloom and thrive at our best. And the more self-aware you become, the more capable you are of cultivating and creating a nurturing ecosystem around you that allows you to thrive and bloom into all of your glory as a human being. And I think that's a really beautiful idea and a beautiful perspective. And so he then goes on to discuss, how this 5-step process is similar to psychotherapy. So he says that therapists look at the nature of the pain. They then uncover the sources of the pain that stem from the way the patient looks at things. So the beliefs he holds about himself, his culture, and the world. The therapist then examines these viewpoints and beliefs with the patient. Together they help free him from the prison he has been in. But the patient's effort is crucial. The teacher has to give birth to the teacher within his student. And in the same way, the psychotherapist has to give birth to the psychotherapist within his patient. So it's really an invitation for you to become your own psychotherapist. The patient's internal psychotherapist can then work full-time in an effective way. The therapist does not need to treat the patient by simply giving him another set of beliefs. She tries to help him see the kinds of ideas and beliefs that have led to his suffering. Many patients want to get rid of their painful feelings, but they do not want to get rid of their beliefs. Their viewpoints are the very roots of their feelings, and so the therapist and the patient have to work together to see things as they are, not as you think they are through your subconscious programming, basically. And this concept really reflects, there's another psychologist or psychiatrist that I really like. He's a pop psychiatrist, Dr. Daniel Amen, and he has completed something like over 60,000 brain scans of people with, health issues and so forth, and has this sort of treatment plan for how to reprogramming, basically brain training, reprogram some misconceptions that you might have about life and your belief system about the world around you. And in the same vein, here what Dr. Daniel Amen also says is that when you start breaking down, so he has this thing called ANTS therapy, automatic negative thoughts therapy, and basically when you have a feeling and you get triggered and you have a feeling, what he suggests that you do is you stop and you start writing down what you're thinking. Right, what were you thinking just before you got that feeling? And then listening to your self-talk and realizing that actually it's your self-talk that's triggering emotion, and it's one after the other. We start saying to ourselves something like, oh, it's been a bad day, oh, I stuffed up, I can never do anything right, oh, this always happens. And like, as soon as you start saying that sort of stuff to yourself, as soon as you start that negative self-talk, then lo and behold, before you realize it, you're triggering all these negative emotions, and then all these negative emotions start coming up, and then it's like a self-perpetuating cycle. Whereas if you stop that on a regular basis and start poking holes in what you're saying to yourself and recognize, step back and recognize, okay, I don't need to turn this into a narrative. I just don't feel good right now. So you can do it that way. Oh, I don't feel good right now. That's it. Just let go of all the talk. I just feel unpleasant, and that's okay. I feel unpleasant. And if I just sit with my unpleasantness, eventually it will dissipate. I'll just give it some time. Or, focus on that process of going, okay, whoa, stop. I'm feeling really crazy right now. What was I just saying to myself? And then actually listing the words that you were saying to yourself and realizing that, hang on, I've triggered my own emotions by the self-talk that I'm creating. And when you think about it, even say when someone triggers anger within you, say you're having a conversation with someone, you're getting triggered by this person, is it what they're saying that's triggering you, or is it the way that you're reacting to them within your own head that's triggering your emotions? Because it's the way that we interpret what's happening that triggers our emotions, not what's actually happening. So you could sit there and go, wow, that person's angry. Is that my problem? Is that my fault? No, they're angry, not me. So that's their problem. That's not my problem. I don't need to now take that on and take it like it's some personal assault against myself. What I can see, I could practice compassion and mindfulness and go, hey, angry person, I see that you're angry. Let's calm the anger. treat them like your inner child. Whoa, what's going on? Let's calm the anger down. Let's soothe the anger. Okay, now that we're calm, let's talk about rationally what's triggering your anger. I don't need to embrace that anger and then light my flame of anger, and then you'll just be two flames fighting against each other, you know. So embracing, if you can embrace your own anger, it's a lot easier for you to then parent other people and embrace their anger and embrace their sadness and embrace their emotions. You know, I think it's an interesting topic in terms of gender, actually, because, you know, a lot of women talk about men being a bit like psychopaths and, you know, not having emotional consideration. And it's funny because we cultivate in our societies a culture where men are not allowed to show their emotions and they're not allowed to be emotionally weak or vulnerable or whatever. And then when they're unable to embrace our vulnerability and our, you know, as women, we get upset. But when we think about it, they can't do that for themselves because they've been subconsciously programmed not to do that, because that's perceived as being a weak man, you know, if you're being vulnerable and everything. And so I think there's a lot of space there to create a bridge of understanding between men and women in terms of cultivating a more nurturing, accepting, embracing society and world, and creating a more peaceful world around us. So that really is the podcast for today. Basically, you know, in reflection, you know, we're talking about just becoming aware of what's going on within ourselves and finding our inner peace. And the more that all of us around the world have inner peace within us, the less we're going to be fighting wars and blaming everyone else for our problems. And that's about building a bridge of understanding. And as Thich Nhat says, you know, walk a day in the shoes of another person. Try and have some understanding and embrace this concept, even just for the exercise of finding inner peace, of non-duality. We're not separate, we're one and the same. And the more we can recognise that, you know, what we can't accept in others is actually a reflection of what we're not able to accept in ourselves and embrace within ourselves, the more we can start building that bridge of understanding and that bridge of self-awareness so that we can create a world of greater peace. So that is my vision podcast special for and response to everything that's happening in the world today. Next week we are going to be talking about my favourite topic, self-discipline. So I'm really excited and I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for coming on board today, and